Good morning, folks. We're going to switch over, and I'd like to ask our panelists to come up, and I've asked Amy Anderson to join as well. So if we could have Judy, Todd, Glenn, and James come up, please. By the way, my name's John Watson, also with the Evergreen Education Group. We're based in Durango, and I welcome my other Western Slope colleagues. So this is a blended learning day, and we've started the day by doing a fair bit of direct instruction, and we're about to change that because we want to blend instruction as well. So the rest of the day is actually going to be quite a bit less of people showing slides and talking at you, and instead quite a few opportunities for discussion, group discussion, full group discussion, table discussions at your tables, the opportunity to look at some videos, case studies, and really talk quite a bit about what you're all doing. And I'd like to start by acknowledging, as other speakers have as well, that we know there's tremendous expertise in this room. And so while we have folks up here on the panel, and in a minute I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but I want to stress that we want to make this next session really interactive. And if you're hearing a question and you have an answer, you're saying, hey, we're dealing with that issue, I'd love to hear from you. So my colleague Amy Murrin has the microphone, and we're going to be taking both questions from the audience and your comments about what you're working on as well. But I'd like to start, and I'll start right here, Todd, with you. If you could all do a very quick introduction, who you are, where you're from. I was going to say why you're here, but I think you know why you're here.
Thanks a bunch, John. My name's Todd Loki. I'm the Director of Online Learning with the San Juan BOCES. I run the Southwest Colorado eSchool. We do quite a bit of partnering with the people to my left, and Judy was a part of establishing as well. So we run an online school that supports various levels of full-time to blended and supplemental learning for students in 9 rural school districts across 5 counties in the southwest corner of the state. And so we are just looking at going from something of a full online school to looking at the blended learning in our small schools, some of which have, like, as was mentioned earlier, we have one high school that offers 4 math classes only in their content catalog. So that's up to college algebra, no pre-calculus, no calculus, no statistics. So we're really trying to address those needs in our rural area through blended learning.
Hi, I'm Glenn Moses. I'm the principal of Jeffco Virtual, which is conveniently located in Jeffco. That's as good as the jokes are going to get, guys. just want to lay that out right now. So currently we serve 850 students, grades 7 through 12. And as we talk about those different models of blended learning, so we got kids who are taking full-time at another school and taking a couple classes with us. We got kids that are full-time with us. So a couple different models there. And the other piece that's powerful is that every teacher and every classroom in our district has access to the curriculum that we create. So if you're a teacher in Jeffco, you've got access to a learning management system, and you've got access to online curriculum. So we're doing this sort of grassroots movement where we're just giving everyone the tools, right? We're building the ecosystem, putting it in place, and saying, hey, go play. If you want some support, we'll give you some support. So there's no top-down push. It's just a matter of putting the right elements in place and watching it happen. It's been pretty exciting.
I'm Judy Barron-Schmidt. I'm currently with the Colorado Charter School Institute, moving over to the e-learning network of Colorado, which is a consortium of about 30-something school districts, and we've been working together as a grassroots effort from about maybe 4 years ago in implementing online and blended learning programs. Formerly, I was with Jeffco and really focused on the blended learning piece, and to the point where my son, who's also a student at Jeffco Online, and his local brick and mortar, he has the advantage of being able to take advantage of 2 different blended learning models. One in the classroom that's being taught by his brick and mortar teachers. They all have access there and to online curriculum and learning management systems. And also he's taking 2 full-time online classes. So the supplemental model, which is really the self-blend and the flex, he takes advantage of all of that. So e-learning network of Colorado is going to bring that to the state, and especially focusing on those who don't have that ability right now. We want to bring access and equity for all the kids across Colorado.
Hi, I'm Amy Anderson, and you just met me a few minutes ago, but I'm a senior director at the Don L. Kay Foundation, and my work now at Don L. Kay is focused on designing our next generation education system. Just no small task, but the idea is that if we were able to start from scratch and we didn't have the constraints of the system that we have today, and we were able to implement the kinds of learning that we are going to be talking about today, and as well as a lot of other aspects of learning that we think are important, how would we start? How would we fund the system? What would the governance model look like? What outcomes would we be seeking in kids? And then how would we align an accountability system to that? What infrastructure would be required? And so we're spending our time both working to continue to seed innovation and support and improve the system that we have today, but also spending a lot more of our energy looking forward at what we're aiming for, and how we can create the right on-ramp to that new system, so that as you guys are doing this great work, that we have a place for you to go with it. And I'm also recently joined the Rocky Mountain Prep Board, so I'm also trying to keep my feet in both policy and practice at the same time.
And one of Amy's first tasks on the board is to get me that report in the next month or two, so we look forward to that. My name is James Crine. I'm the founder of Rocky Mountain Prep. We're a new elementary school in Denver, and we're a charter school.
I'll note, as many of you know, that Amy Anderson left CDE not too long ago to create the next generation of learning. She was looking for an easier job after trying to be at CDE. I'm going to start with a question for several of the panelists. I invite anyone who wants to jump in with a question as well, just to get Amy's attention to get the microphone. But I want to get to this issue of, Amy talked a fair bit about the basics of blended learning, and also made the point that really the place to start isn't the content, it's not the technology, it's what are you trying to do, what are you trying to solve? A couple of you touched on that, but I think especially as we think about the fact that we've had online schools here in Colorado for a long time, relative to other states. We have some supplemental, as Amy Anderson talked about. When you think about going beyond that and really getting to blended programs, blended school models, I know, James, you're thinking about it in your school, Jeffco, Todd, you're thinking about it on the Western Slope. There's very different flavors of those types of things in a state like Colorado. So, James, I think I'll start with you to talk about what you're identifying as the problem that you're addressing at Rocky Mountain Prep, and then perhaps go to Todd and Judy.
Sure. So I was fortunate. I got to approach this question of what is a really highly effective and high leverage educational experience for a child a bit as an outsider, because I was a middle school teacher and now I'm working with elementary and pre-K students. And as a teacher, I used to pat myself on the back and think I was totally kicking ass when I was differentiating instruction by not having not one, not two, but 3 different worksheets for students to practice the same skill on. And I was like, yes, I am killing it today. And that was only, some days that I was doing that. And so what we decided was that great elementary instruction is really small group or one-on-one differentiated time with the teacher. And so we thought about, how do we maximize that time? How do we create as many of those experiences for a kid as possible, and then make sure all the other time that they're not working one-on-one or in a small group with a teacher, that they're actually practicing at their ability level. So we don't have worksheets in our classroom. We no longer pat our backs about 3 different levels of worksheets. And we have kids using adaptive online content, so they're always practicing that low-level skills at their level, and we find that to be pretty powerful.
Todd, can you address that from rural southwestern Colorado?
Yeah, I thought I'd share a little bit about how the Southwest Colorado eSchool started up. We're in our 2nd year, and there was a core group that actually worked with the Evergreen Foundation to really establish what the desired outcomes were. And the first year really just started to establish a pretty strict kind of full-time online school. So what we faced in year 2 is the challenge of getting everybody to understand, first and foremost, what the concept of online learning is, because there's such a broad interpretation of that concept, but also the relationship with 9 different school districts, 10 different high schools, and that when a student came to us either full-time or in kind of our first attempts at this kind of flex blend model was they always wanted to push the kid out the door when it was time for them to do their online courses. So one of our biggest challenges is changing the culture, not in one school, but 9 of them or 10 of them, and to really change the culture so students have an acceptable place to learn. One of the biggest challenges with some of our brick and mortar schools is the families feeling accepted when they walk through the door. So I'm living this challenge now that as soon as a kid gets labeled as an e-school, they say they want to put them in a period, they want to put them with a teacher, they want to make sure there's someone to monitor them and accountability, and they're so wrapped around structure that they stop thinking about students, to be honest. So our big challenge is to really work through what it means to have a kid who needs courses that are in both places. So our flex model runs 2 ways. They could be full-time and be really mostly a supplemental student. That'd be a student taking courses that aren't offered in the brick and mortar. But then we've really this year expanded to it being flipped. We have quite a number of students who are taking most of their core classes in an online environment, and then they're taking things they can't get in an online environment, like theater and choir and band, engineering programs, career and technical ed, ag programs with their local high schools. So that's helped, but it's taking a lot of energy to overcome just general knowledge about how those relationships will work. So our biggest challenge is ahead of us, and fortunately we have some matching grants. 2 of our 9 high schools are going to be rebuilt and in the next 3 or 4 years. So we have an opportunity to say there needs to be a place in these buildings that looks different for that flex model so that a kid can go to school and have a place to work rather than everything being kind of a traditionally organized model that doesn't accept our blended learning students. So that's one interest we have. I'll try to be short on the next point. But another founding principle of going to online learning in our region was to eventually include regional teachers. So the question I get all the time is, why aren't any local teachers teaching full-time in the online school? Well, just like our small rural schools, we're a small online program, so it'd be really hard to staff without them teaching an unacceptable load of courses. So really we're going to look towards how do we use online and blended designs to have teachers who are currently staffed in buildings start to teach courses that have some online components to it. But the key here, which is totally new, is that a teacher in Mancos who has a gift in a certain area teaches a course with an online component, but her students in her class are in Mancos, and they're in Dove Creek, and they're in Dolores, and they're in Bayfield, in those small rural districts, because then there's another teacher in those schools who will teach a different course that's offered backwards, so it's reciprocal. So we're really trying to say we need to expand offerings. We want to include local teachers, but in order to expand offerings in multiple small schools, we're going to start having the boundary of teachers being in a single school in a single district start to fade and expand. So that's the concept. That's where I'd like to see us go, but that in and of itself has its own challenge.
That staffing issue, which is such a need in rural Colorado and other rural parts of the country, is one, there's creative ways to get at those staffing issues, which Todd is talking about. And Joe is going to be leading a whole session about staffing a little bit later this morning, which will touch on that as well. But the other thing that Todd, you mentioned that I think is so relevant here is getting districts to work together. Because what we see is when you look at so many of the examples that are out there and that are commonly talked about, Carpe Diem, Rocket Ship, others like that, they tend to have a couple of things in common. They tend to either be startups or turnarounds. And it's a very different situation, as all of you who come to us from an existing district, I think, know about it. And so I'd like to go to Judy and then Glenn to talk, Judy, first about eLink and that effort to get districts working together. And then Glenn, if you could give us your perspective from how do you address some of these issues from within a large district like Jeffco. Judy?
So, I'm glad you shared all of that, Todd, because that really, I can piggyback on that in the fact that, when we started working together as a group of districts, we were sharing a lot of these common issues. And how do you overcome that? What we found is that there was an advantage of being in a large district where we had many resources, and we may not have had the pain points that some of the smaller rural districts had. I recently created and sent out a needs assessment survey to all of our member districts, and I'm looking at the results as they're coming in, and truly the areas where we have the biggest gaps or the largest need is professional development and training at every level. So one of the areas I was asking about was professional development for everything from the Board of Education at your district to superintendent to cabinet to principals and all the way down the line. So what I found was that highest and high needs were marked for all of those areas. So if you're trying to create a blended learning program in your district, you're going to have to face all of those levels in order for them to truly understand what it is, what are the benefits of bringing these types of programs to a district. Access to digital content was another area high need. And whether it was for an online program or a blended learning program, the access was in the form of we can't afford it because right now what we're using isn't sustainable over time, or we just don't have access, period. And then the third area was again with even consulting, like customizing that training to our specific needs. So if we're a rural school and we want to expand to be blended across 9 districts, we need help there. Or we're a very large school, we're dealing with many school principals. How do you get this communication out there so that they understand how this can be a benefit for the entire district, including their school? So a lot of what Todd was saying is what we're finding in this needs assessment survey, and we'll be presenting this to our members. What that is going to allow us to do is to guide us in the next steps that we will have to take in order to support all of our membership.
Glenn, if I can interject before we go to you momentarily. Judy, some of those issues that you're raising about what's stopping districts from taking these next steps, Scott Ellis is going to be talking quite a bit about that, I believe, early this afternoon. The Learning Accelerator is looking at some of these issues and trying to identify those things, because I think that's part of what we see in Colorado, undoubtedly, is that, look, we've had online schools for how long?
12, 13 years.
Yeah, 13 years or so. There are some of these supplemental programs. I mean, the Jeffco program is a district program that's been around for so long. But we still aren't really seeing this spread that we'd like to see, where you have a situation where students across the state really have those options. And so I really think that a key issue in Colorado, as well as in plenty of other states, is how do you take that to the next level so that more and more students have that access? But Judy, I want to ask you about one thing that you said, and I wonder if Amy Anderson might have a comment on this as well, which is, in some of the surveys we've done as well, we've seen school administrators talking about the digital content issues, saying that they don't have access to digital content. The flip side of that is, I'm going to do a content session a little bit later. There are dozens of content options. So I'll go to Judy or Amy or anybody else who wants to comment. Is that an issue that they're not seeing the right fit, they're not seeing the right quality, or quite frankly, is they don't want to pay for it?
Well, all three, actually, and this is coming from my experience as well as leading an online school. I come from an online charter school where the digital content we were using was what you call the CAN curriculum. So the teachers were able to use that content, but they couldn't really customize it or go in there and manipulate it so it would meet the needs of their particular classrooms. Yeah. And so what I found was there was an advantage going to a district leading an online program there, in that we allowed, we were using both. We were using a hybrid of course content that we had to purchase from a vendor, and then we also started looking at creating our own content, because for the past, I've been in this for 10, 11 years, that whole time teachers are asking for the ability to go into those courses and customize the content to meet the needs of their students, so really truly individualized instruction and learning. So we are hearing that also from our districts, that we want to be able to have something that, number one, we can afford. Number two, that we can go in there and manipulate and create these classroom environments that really speak to the personality of the teacher and the students in those classes.
I would just add that I think that it's overwhelming for a lot of schools and districts. There's so much content out there. And I can speak to an example. I've been involved with another charter school that is wanting to make a shift, the Odyssey School, from a face-to-face project-based learning, expeditionary learning school to a blended model. Looking at all of the different content that's out there from the perspective of a leader of a small school and figure out which is the right content, what's going to be, having the capacity and the time to vet that content and figure out how to integrate it into your school, creating the space to test it. I know James is working on creating kind of an innovation lab of sorts where he can test different things, which I think is a great idea. But I think partly it's overwhelming, and so I think school leaders in particular need help to figure out what's the right path for them. Again, I think there's also, with everything else, everybody has different programs and different needs. A school that's an expeditionary learning school is going to want something in the new tech schools I was just in Texas, they're very much project-based. There's not a lot of project-based online blended learning out there, and how do you integrate that? It's very different from a school that is like a rocket ship that's creating a lab, and they have different needs. And so I think it's also providing, we don't yet, because blended is still relatively new, have enough capacity out there to help support people at the local level. And I think the same goes for our full-time online schools. I mean, I'm looking at Heather, I think about Hope Online. You've been doing a blended model for a long time. What is the next iteration of that? And I don't know kind of what your specific needs might be. But so I think capacity support is key.
I'm going to jump into.
Yeah, please talk about the Innovation Lab, and then Heather, I'd love to give you a chance to address that in a minute about what you are thinking about as a long-time blended program. But let me go to James and then Glenn, who I promised a chance about 10 minutes ago, and then Heather. But James, yeah, I'm interested in hearing about the Innovation Lab.
Let me hold on.
Or you're going to answer a different question.
Well, just some thoughts on content.
Yeah.
I think we're really early stage right now.
Yeah.
There's not a common agreed upon language, data language, or open APIs for content providers to talk to one another, and especially with LMSs or data systems. So most content providers, I think, live in a distorted reality where they believe they can be a proprietary solution. And when, as a school leader, you go that route, you're choosing simplicity over quality usually. And when you look to find quality content providers, they're usually solving more discrete academic needs. And right now, and usually you can find better UI or user interface, better data systems on the back end, or better adaptability. But it's hard to find that in a kind of one-size-fits-all package. And there's a real trade-off as a school leader of, do I go with the simple kind of one or two content provider routes, or do I go like first-line schools who have, I think, 36 different content providers?
So what's your decision at Rocky Mountain?
So we're going simpler. So we use 3 different content providers right now.
Okay. Well, we're going to have this session about content and data later today, and I'd like to hear more from you at that point. Glenn, let's go back to, I'm interested in really how you think about a place like Jeffco and taking what was an early alternative program and thinking about how do you spread that to more students across the district?
So Jeffco did something brilliant, and they took competition out of the equation. So children throughout the district, even kids who are taking classes with us part-time, don't pay to come to Jeffco Virtual. So if you want to take a class during your scheduled school day, it costs you nothing, and it costs the school that they go to nothing. So we're not pulling their FTE. We're a line item in the budget. That's a dream, right? So other districts that I've worked in, other places that I've worked in, you go in as a virtual principal, a virtual representative, and you'd say, hey, I'd like to have some of your kids come over to our school, and they just walk you right back out of their building because you know they're going to take their FTE. So that barrier being gone in and of itself is pretty awesome, and a brilliant decision to help grow a school from the beginning. The other piece, just something I wanted to jump on before we move on, is this idea of lack of project-based learning in the online learning space. What we've done so far in the last 12 years of online learning is we've taken the traditional classroom and we've shoved it into the computer, right? And we know we have kids coming to us that the traditional methods haven't worked for. So great, we've done a really good job of digitizing the traditional classroom, which we know does zero good for the vast majority of the children that are coming to us. Right, so when we look at those statistics, those numbers that come up, it's not about the kids. Well, in truth, it's hardly ever about the kids, right? It's about the decisions we're making as adults, right, and the curriculum that we're providing for them. So we have an opportunity here to rethink what we can do right? This idea of online learning being the third teacher, the online space being the third teacher. Question is, are we going to do it? Hasn't happened yet. I'm probably a little impatient, but I mean, we're looking down, 20 years now? We're getting close to 20 years of online learning in the way that it looks. And it looks pretty much the same as it did 20 years ago. Well, I mean, it's not dial-up anymore. That's nice.
Heather, your program's been around for quite a few of those 20 years. Can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about blended and what sorts of changes you're thinking about in the future?
Well, I think what's the best thing is that we're not talking just about the platform.
And if I can interrupt for a second, for people who don't know who you are and your program, could you mention that?
I'm Heather O'Mara. I'm the founder of Hope Online, and Hope is a blended learning school that started in 2005 to serve students in Colorado. We have a network of 42 learning centers that are based mainly in the Front Range, and we serve K through 12 students. When we started, nobody knew what blended learning was, and it was an interesting model because online schools didn't really like us because we weren't completely online, because we have a face-to-face component where kids really attend our learning centers following the same hours of a traditional school day, but the average learning center only has about 50 kids. So it's probably an Innosight model. It's more like a flex model because we really model the learning and the instruction based on what the students' needs. Our kindergartners are online or on the computer, less than our high school students. But I think what's the best thing about this conversation is that we're not talking just about what the platform is or just the content. The content of the curriculum that we use, and it's interesting, I'm going to have to leave early today because we're actually doing a curriculum RFP right now. So we have a whole group of content providers that are going to be at our office. The curriculum, online curriculum, is really like a textbook. So it's really, you're reviewing your online curriculum, just like in a traditional school. You figure out how you're going to adopt your textbooks. There's never going to be a curriculum that's going to meet 100% of your needs. And I think Judy's 100% right. We need to give teachers the ability to individualize the curriculum and make it meet the needs of their students, whether it's each individual students or small groups. And I think those are the things that Hope that we've been struggling with. We started out, I had no experience in public education, which was probably a good thing. Not because I don't respect public educators, because I don't think I knew what I was getting into and I didn't understand the challenges that I was going to face. That being said, I think I have so much respect for what everybody does and how do we take the best of a traditional system and the best of online, and how do we bring it together? How do we relook at the model and relook at the staffing and continually tweak everybody's job? And I think that's something we've been doing from the beginning. When we started, we found a curriculum. We were partnered with a small district that didn't give us a lot of support. When I heard somebody say professional, Judy I think said professional development, year one of Hope we had 1 day of professional development. Now we have 24 days. And I think those are the things that are required and important because we're putting teachers and individuals, students and parents in a very new environment. So we have to provide the support, we have to provide the curriculum, we have to provide the platform, but probably most importantly, we need to be willing to change and continue to look at that. So I just appreciate forums like this to hear about everybody's ideas because nobody's doing it right. And we all have to. We never will, because when we see statistics like that for kids, yes, the kids are coming to Hope and other schools not being successful, but our job is to make them successful because we're failing them, they're not failing. So.
Thanks, Heather. We're going to wrap this up in just a couple of minutes. I want to see if there are any questions from the audience, and I'm also going to put one final question to the panel, which is, given where you are, you get a choice to answer either of two questions. One is, what would your recommendation be for the folks in the room who are still fairly new, because you're all at different levels of experience? So that's one option. The second option is, if you'd prefer to talk about what's the next thing that you're trying to take on at your school or your district or consortium that you're trying to tackle that we might get into some discussion about today, I'd like to hear that as well. So either one of those, and I'd like to hear from everybody briefly, starting with whoever would like to begin. James, you're looking at me.
Sucker. So I've always pushed to try and be clear with myself and my team about what problem we're trying to solve, and seeking out solutions that align to that and continuing to test and iterate and see if we're moving that down the road or if we need to think about it in a new direction. And the current thing that I'm thinking about is how come the status quo is so sticky, and how do we create a space where we constantly test out new ideas and have a space to test new curriculum live with kids, that pushes our teachers and pushes our team to constantly be pushing forward, because we've built a model that gets sharper every single year as the tools get sharper, which we're excited about. But we know that, despite the fact that we're very enthused about early results with kids, that we need to continue to push ourselves in our thinking hard and try and break paradigms around what's possible for our kids.
I guess I would like to recommend, whether you're a school that's been around for a while and you're wanting to push the limits and do something different or better, or you're new to this work, that you pick something that's like a small bite, something small and discrete, a problem that you want to tackle, and figure out how you can look at a blended solution to tackling that and creating a learning community either within your school or with other schools and districts who are trying to tackle that problem. I think that as people look at this and try to say, okay, we want to move solely from this place where we're at now to this dramatically different place, they get stuck in this overwhelming place. And so my recommendation would be pick something that you think you can tackle and go for it.
Actually, I'm going to say something similar, is know what it is that you're trying to resolve. Many times when I've worked with schools or districts in the past, it's been more about really analyzing your needs and what is it that you're trying to accomplish. What are your goals? And let's not have a 10 goals to try to tackle all at once. Let's look at what your true basic needs are, and then you build from there. And rather than doing it alone, don't try to reinvent the wheel that many other schools and practitioners, districts have been through. The collaboration and sharing that experience with others has really, I truly believe, has been the most valuable piece of working here in Colorado, is sharing those ideas and making sure that what we're building in Colorado is going to be quality.
So for those of you that may be thinking about starting an organization or are still new to it, two quick thoughts. One is, just remember that most of the kids are coming to you not because you're an online school. They don't even care that you're an online school. They're looking for something different, right? And the reason they're looking for something different may be that their school doesn't offer that at their home school, right? So that's a kid who's highly motivated. They just need you to be different because they can't get it there. And then you've got kids who traditional schooling hasn't been working for. That they earnestly do not care that you're an online school. Like this whole digital natives thing doesn't matter, right? They don't care, right? They're just looking for something different in a place where people are going to take care of them. So where I'm going with that is you can be a blended school or an online school. None of that matters, right? What matters is the culture that you build in your organization. You can buy the best curriculum. You can have the highest qualified teachers. Doesn't matter. But every day of the week doesn't matter, right? If you're not building a school culture that's not judgmental, right? A place where kids can feel safe, in a place where everyone in your organization believes in the unlimited potential of every single child, you're just going to spin your wheels. The second thing I'd like to leave you with is that what I hear a lot, especially in the online learning space, is that online learning isn't for every child. And I want to spin that. And I want to spin that back to online learning isn't for every teacher and it isn't for every administrator, right? If you're an online school and a kid comes to your front door, it's your job to educate that child. And let's put a period, ding, right? And just make it work, right? Get rid of the barriers, because there's going to be barriers. Figure out what the child needs. Give the child what they need. Give them a high-quality education. Those are my two pieces.
I'm going to add, because working with multiple districts, we've had to overcome some of the competitive barriers that Glenn talked about earlier. So we've actually done that through the multi-district status, and the funding goes to those districts. But there's a lot of other barriers. I mean, calendars aside, 9 different spring breaks, 9 different PLC times, 9 different contracts, 9 different learning management, or 9 different student information systems. It's daunting. So really the approach that I would say is, first part is you need to find a way to avoid a kind of an atmosphere of competitiveness. So with this, our region is doing so much. We're at effectiveness pilots. We're doing LDC and MDC, and I can just throw out acronyms for things that we're doing that have yet to hit every other place in the state. So that even the leaders are like, there's too much on our plate. So the approach that I think we all need to take when you're starting something is, like they addressed that, or said earlier, that it needs to address some very specific need. And so I'd say smaller is better, so that you build a reputation. I think reputation after your first year counts for more than anything. But the second thing is it really needs to answer something. Like in our case with all these small districts is if I can't offer them something new within their current existing structure, then it's going to feel like too much of an added weight. So I need to build something that utilizes existing people and does something like say, you give me one teacher, one period, I'll expand your course offerings by 4 with 1 period. So give a little, take a little. So that would be my advice, is to try to utilize existing structures, but to make sure it's providing something new and needed.
Excellent. Well, I thank the panelists. I think that's set an excellent start for our day. Thank you very much.